There were many N64 games that everyone seemed to have on their shelves back in the day, games like Turok, Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, games like that. But an even more niche area of said ranks were the games that everyone owned but never seemed to play, and thus had low value amongst us savvy recess game traders. Those include games like Forsaken, Body Harvest, Cruisin' USA, and Turok Rage Wars, which is a whole other topic on its own. But I think that amongst all those games, one stands out as the game that absolutely everyone owned, but never played. It was so common that your brain wouldn't even register it as being there when looking through your friend's stack of games. And that game is none other than 1080 Snowboarding. Now this is a strange case, because despite being overlooked and being more common than wood in a forest, 1080 Snowboarding is a pretty decent game. It was Nintendo's answer to PlayStation's Cool Borders, and Nintendo was out for blood. This game released in 1998 and was developed by Nintendo, and upon its release, 1080 received very positive reviews, earning an average critic score of between 9 and 7 out of 10, which is pretty good. On top of that, the game was nominated for Best N64 Game at the 1998 CNET Game Center Awards, but it lost to Ocarina of Time. I mean, no surprise there, really. I'm actually surprised by how much critical acclaim this game received, but I'm sure we're all wondering the same thing. Does 1080 live up to all the reviews? Well, let's find out. Does anyone remember 1080 Snowboarding? In any racing game, the most important thing is who or what you're racing as. And 1080 allows you to choose from 5 characters, which granted is a little sparse, but there are also a dozen or so boards you can choose from, each of which having their own stats, so you can really mix and match based off what event you plan on doing. So when you really get down to it, your choices end up being pretty decently varied. But quick side note, I really like the character select screen, or scene rather. It's very creative how the camera just pans around the lodge to the various characters who are just chilling out, doing their own thing. And I can't not mention the lodge theme. I mean, it's just this generic hip hop loop, but still, it's an absolute banger. Just listen.
Work your body, work your body, work your body, work your body. Push it in. Work your body, work your body, work your body, work your body.
Oh, so good. This song is the first thing that comes to mind whenever I think about this game, every time without fail. That and the Smash Bros. Announcer saying, Kensuke Kimachi!
Kensuke Kimachi versus Rob Haywood.
Alright, I think we've spent enough time chilling in the lodge. I suppose I should probably touch on the courses and various events you can take part in, and to my surprise, there are actually quite a few to choose from. That being said, match race, time attack, trick attack, and contests are all basically the exact same thing with slightly different modifiers. I mean, you could probably guess what they all are just off the titles alone, although contest is a single contestant slalom challenge. It's not what I expected, so yeah. In trick attack, along with all the other levels, you have access to an additional 2, air make and half pipe, and honestly, I'm okay with this. The one thing I want to do more than anything else in a snowboarding game is do crazy flips and shit off massive jumps, but unfortunately, these 2 levels are really the only places that allow you to do so. I mean, along with the training course, but that's still just a half pipe and some flatland jumps, plus your score never saves in that mode, so who cares? And speaking of the courses, the ones you race, slalom, and trick down are all mountainside courses. I mean, just normal, everyday mountainside courses. And that's okay and all, but I think for me at least, that's the major disconnect. There doesn't seem to be any type of wow factor to them. Nintendo had such a huge opportunity to take what the competition had been doing and go bigger and better. Here, let's compare 1080's courses to those of Cool Borders 2, which came out a year prior.
Cool Borders! Here we go!
Well shit, I was gonna compare the two, but my copy of Cool Borders 2 freezes whenever I try to boot up a level. What about Cool Borders 1, which came out 2 years prior?
This is it. Now's your chance to prove you can really carve. What? You should try the bunny flip next time. Yeah. Weak. There's a clip coming up. Pull some air. Oh, weak.
Ugh, never mind, this game looks like absolute dog shit, and is totally counter to my point about 1080's courses being stale. What I'm trying to say is that adding a bit of pizzazz to the races, you know, like a few jumps here, a few jumps there, maybe a rail up there, was well within the capabilities of the N64 and Nintendo. What a shame. I mean, as it stands, 1080's courses all boil down to just maneuvering various ice patches, avoiding fallen trees and standing trees, landing boring 2-foot jumps, and of course making it to the finish line alive, either in first or with the best score possible. In most cases, this is easier said than done. For example, the AI's rubber banding during the races in particular is hilariously bad. No matter what happens, your opponent is always right behind you. One slip up and you can kiss first place goodbye, and then you have to like hold forward on the joystick to try and gain speed, and then you end up crashing more. I mean, it's worse than Cruisin' World. Once you lose that lead, it's very hard to get it back. And I'll be honest, not every single course is generic or without excitement. There are two I really like in this game. First, the Mountain Village course. There's a part where you race down an icy patch of road, then through a village, dodging cars and road signs, and I gotta say, this is pretty awesome. And the second would be Dragon Cave, and, well, this one's just awesome from start to finish. It's fast, perilous, and the rope bridges with the flames are just wicked. But the bridges are way too narrow, and you gotta be almost perfectly centered to make it over them without fault, but great level nonetheless. Oddly enough, I didn't see a single cave here, just canyons, so false advertising there. Oh, and one thing I gotta mention is the skybox or faux background in this level. It looks great, especially in the beginning of the race when you're on the top of the mountain. These two courses are amazing, not without faults, but they're still really good. They're fast, exciting, and varied, but unfortunately, the rest are just extremely forgettable. All of the courses feature areas made up of powder or deep snow, which is all good and well, but anytime you ride through these areas, the visual effect of the snow flying all over the place causes the game to very visibly slow down, I'd say to about 10 frames a second, which on one hand isn't a huge issue. If you've played a lot of N64 in your life, you know this kind of slowdown just comes with the territory. That's just how she goes. On the other hand, it's a real piss off, especially on the expert championships where every second counts, because it can mess you up, causing you to crash, thus losing your hard-earned lead. Another piss off I have is that your character seems to have a mind of their own, which more often than not means they'll constantly try to crash you directly into the nearest wall. Like seriously, most of my time racing is spent purely on fighting against this fucking game. Like here, see this? I just recorded this bullshit, okay? Like just recorded it like 20 minutes ago. Looks like I'm cruising, right? Just chillin'? Wrong. My fucking dumbass, smooth-brained, shitbag pile of polygons is turning sharp left this whole time, while I'm just reefing full right on the joystick. Just to go straight, down a straightaway. Like, I have no idea why this happens, and it happens all the time, like, consistently. So I've learned one thing, that if this game can fuck you, it will. And turning normally is no better because your character doesn't seem to straighten out on their own like typical racing games. The best way I can explain it is, say you're playing Need for Speed, right? And you make a turn, but your car keeps turning forever until you straighten the wheel out manually. And if the ground you're on is at any kind of angle, this is made even worse. You seem to always gravitate towards the nearest wall, as I said above. Like, it's complete and utter fucking bullshit. I can't get over how annoying this is. Like, I'm fresh off recording, as I just said, but holy shit, I hate this game right now. Fuck this game, for real. Like, why wouldn't they test it? Like, Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, so I'll be honest, by the time I finished the normal championship, I didn't really want to keep doing the races, as they are, in my opinion, the weakest portion of the game. However, I think if they had made the game a bit more arcadey and relaxed, like adding more bigger jumps as I mentioned above, and having landing said jumps easier, which I'm about to get into, it would have made the races way more palatable. But as it stands, it just feels like they tried to make the game more realistic, but forgot to thoroughly test out the mechanics. But the courses all by and large feel samey, aside from the latter half of Mountain Village and Dragon Cave of course. And by the time I got to the Expert Championship, it was clear that it was just going to be more of the same races over and over again, only with different modifiers, like weather, and incredibly difficult opponents. The difficulty and often cheaty nature of the AI, mixed with the temperamental balance and landing mechanic, really disincentivize any fun during races, and I found myself actively avoiding jumps in favor of staying on the ground in order to not fall and lose, which is incredibly boring and counterintuitive, especially when you're playing a snowboarding game where all you want to do is hit massive jumps to nail a McTwist or two on your way to the finish line. Compare this to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, where you kinda just go. Make sure you land straight and you're good. Now I know Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is just about as arcadey as you can possibly get within this genre, and 1080 Snowboarding is a little more grounded, but I wish they would have met somewhere in the middle. Speaking of which, I just do not understand how landing jumps works in this game. I know I've mentioned this a few times already, but damn, apparently I need to hold the Z button or press it right before landing. One of the two, and I've tried everything, but it really only seems to work when it wants to. Add on to this the fact that you basically need to have pixel perfect balance upon landing to not lose speed or wipe out, and it becomes a very involved process. Especially when you're barely in the lead to begin with, it becomes a gamble. On that note, there were actually times where taking a dive was actually a better move than attempting the jump itself. Throughout my entire playtime for this video, I was never able to land jumps consistently. I just couldn't get it. I don't understand. But oddly enough, the halfpipe is incredibly easy to land tricks on. You simply hold A till you reach the table, then release, do your trick, and land. Simple. Which brings me to another irritating aspect of this game. It's made me mad as hell for 25 years now, and it's how you actually execute the tricks themselves. And I'll concede that the rationale for why the controls are the way they are makes sense, I guess. I mean, in terms of a racing game where you wouldn't want to accidentally do a trick when you don't want to, sure. But for a fun arcade game, these controls are completely counterintuitive. I just want to get some hang time and be free to see how many flips I can do before landing on my face. But in 1080, oh no, you need to have a degree in astrophysics and the reflexes of an F1 driver to even come close. Furthermore, this game has a whole trick list you have to commit to learning. What is this, Mortal Kombat? Luckily there's a mode for this, training. And in this mode you can see the whole list. And one cool thing about this is that once you've successfully landed the displayed trick, it'll automatically move you on to the next. And these start simple, like hold B and right, but they quickly become bullshit. For example, to pull off a 180, you'd think you just tilt the stick mid-air a la Tony Hawk, but no, that's too easy. In mid-air, you have to tilt the stick, then hit R, which honestly isn't all that terrible, but to do a 720, you get this. Spin the stick and press R, then do it again, only the second time you need to press B, all in one fluid motion. Holy shit, 1080, give me a break. Luckily, this game is kinda forgiving with the timing in which you have to hit buttons, but it's still a completely asinine way to program tricks. And man, I tried to do a 1080 for the video, for the meme, you know, for you guys, but fuck, I just could not do it. Look at this button combo. Nah, I'm not destroying my joystick just to do a 1080. Hell, I couldn't even do a 720, so I don't even know why I was trying. And that's about it. There isn't a whole lot else to say about the original 1080. It's a very average and simple racing game, and at the time there weren't that many snowboarding games out there for N64. I mean, there was Snowboard Kids, which no one remembers, so who cares? However, the PlayStation had Cool Boarders, which was going strong at this time, with the second one having been released a year or so prior to positive reviews, thus leading 1080 to kinda miss its mark. Now, I don't usually double up in these videos, but as a little bonus, let's take a look at the sequel. I won't go too much into detail as this video is about the original, so does anyone remember 1080 Avalanche? Well, let me tell ya, I sure as shit don't. I was too busy living my life having no idea this game existed. Like seriously, when in the shit did this even come out? Oh, 2003? My only question is, why? Why another 1080 game? Well, after doing a bit of digging, I can semi-confidently say that 1080 Avalanche slipped into nothingness due to the success of the SSX games. Avalanche released in 2003, but so did SSX 3, not to mention Tricky released in 2001, which really gave freedom and chaos to snowboarding games on a level that we hadn't seen before, and pretty much set the bar, leading to most games within the genre following suit. Hell, even some critics of the time said that it couldn't compete with SSX 3. As for the game, well, most of the modes are still there. Contest is now more appropriately named Gate Challenge. Trick Attack is still here, only this time you can only pick 3 courses: Air Make, Half Pipe, and Terrain Park, which is lame because in the original you could do any track you want, so I don't know why they made that change. And there's of course a colorful cast of characters, and they are absolute 90s trash stereotypes, especially Rob with his 90s douche tribal tattoos, tank top in the snow, and spiked blonde hair. The soundtrack of the overall game is pretty amazing. If it's 2003 and you're an emo kid in the 8th grade, that is. It includes artists like Finger 11 and Seether. I mean, there are more, like Cauterize, Boy Sets Fire, Socket Zero, Squid, and B711, but Seether and Finger 11 are the only 2 I know out of the pile. Mostly all of it is just pop punk and alt rock, which is okay. I mean, it really fits with the theme of the game and the time period in which it came out, so what more could you really ask for? I'm very pleased to announce that tricks are no longer absolute bullshit to pull off. To spin, you just hold a trigger. Simple. The tricks are much easier to land during the race as well, so you can actually have some fun now. And the new feature to regain your balance after a rough landing is a nice touch. But on the flip side, the motion blur is awful, and it's usually used in conjunction with screen shake, which is also awful. This is most notable on the spinal damage challenge, where there's an avalanche coming down the mountain behind you and it wrecks a building. Or at least I think that's what's going on. I can hardly see or tell what's happening at all here. I mean, look at this. Oh, and the damage bar. I completely forgot to mention this throughout the entire video, and it works the same in both games, so I'll just explain it now. So if your character gets too many boo-boos, they'll quit, return to the lodge, and regale the other characters about how they slammed into a tree at 100 kilometers an hour, when all they really did was fall in soft powder twice. You should really ask Tony Hawk how he does it. I mean, neck of steel on that guy. Head of steel too, shit. I get why the damage bar is a thing, but for the original 1080 in particular, you're far more likely to lose a race than you are to die during it. So in the end, 1080 is a staple N64 entry, one which is hard to forget, and while I do have fond memories of the original, I definitely went into this video with the most intensely rose-tinted glasses on. I can almost see why 1080 was received as highly as it was. Almost. Once in a blue moon, while playing, when the moon is at a specific phase and the tide is out and the clouds part and your game stops chugging for a split second, long enough for you to have some uninterrupted fun, you really see why it was as critically acclaimed as it was, but that rarely happens. That being said, I'm still very glad I remember 1080 snowboarding, and I'll likely never forget it, but man, it's mediocre and it doesn't hold up at all. You're better off playing any other snowboarding game you can get your hands on, aside from Cool Borders 1, because that game's hot garbage. Avalanche, however, while not as classic, is by all accounts bigger and better. They took the relatively stale experience that was the original 1080 and made it more chaotic and forgiving, thus more fun, which, I'll be honest, Avalanche is genuinely fun despite its bullshit, but unfortunately, due to its Nintendo exclusivity paired with SSX practically running the show by then, 1080 unfortunately lost out once again. But what about all of you though? Did you remember 1080? Did you know 1080 Avalanche was a thing? Did you like the original? Did you like Avalanche? Let me know down in the comments. As for me, I'm off to hunt the pigeon that's been shitting on my windowsill, but before I do, I'd like to say thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.
Work your body.